We go. There we go. How you doing? You all right?
I'm good, man. I am great. I am glad we're doing this and just making sure bombs, but I'm good. Yeah. Cold. Where are you at? Are you in a cabin? Like, where are you?
No, I'm in a shed.
You're
Yeah,
chef.
everyone's always like, are you in like a chalet or something? No, it's the shed. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, like after the when it became apparent that I was going to be working from home for like the foreseeable future, I was like, I'm going to sort the shed out and make it like a little workspace.
Oh, that's
So
nice.
yeah, it's cool. It's been a bit cold to be honest, most of the winter. Because it's obviously not insulated. So
Yeah.
I've got a little heater in there, but most of the winter I've been kind of battling like condensation and now I'm like now that spring's there I can kind of I've probably got like 2 months before then it'll be too much like a greenhouse because obviously it's like glass. So
Yeah.
um then the summer it's too hot, but it's been good. It's been good. Whereabouts are
That's.
you?
I'm at home in SoCal, so I'm in Southern California right now, and basically wake up, meditate. I have surfing training this morning, and then I have deep sea or deep water training, like deep fitness training with like Navy SEALs and ex Rangers. So
Yeah, is that the thing that you posted on your Instagram? Like
yeah,
the basically looks like you're kind of marching across the bottom of a pool with dumbbells.
yeah, I was. It was, and basically
How
treading
how
water for
how
like
is
45
that?
minutes. Honestly, that was the easiest part of the workout. That was the easiest part of the workout. The other hard part is like I'm so dense that I'm treading water and I'm like sitting there and I'm like, guys, like I don't know if I can do this because like I'm so dense and I keep sinking. So everyone on the team is amazing to work with. Like the team is like full of like ex, Rangers and ex Special Forces people. And then you got like Chuck that ski down Mavericks. He's in that team too. And then you got like Izzy
Ah,
like
right,
that, Jaws. So it's hard, but it's by far the hardest work I've ever done in my regime.
right.
So yeah,
So like, are you pretty much constantly like working to a plan for the goals that you've set yourself? I mean, we should talk about what
yeah,
those goals are in a minute, but like
yeah, yeah,
because like it could just because obviously we've been chatting for quite a while now, and
yeah,
we follow each other, and I've been sort of following what you do, and yeah, it looks like you're pretty methodical in the way that you approach this. Is so like are you
yeah.
constantly like there's a plan, it's goal based to like and it, kind of outcome based. That's sort
Yeah,
of what it
that's a
seems
good
like.
question. And I think yeah, it's definitely a framework. And I'm looking at my calendar right now in my room that like has every X leading up to Denali, and then like from there, like every training regime in it. So again, like I train anywhere from 14 hours a week to 21 hours a week, and it's basically there's times a week I have conditioning training in the gym with my trainer doing sled pushes, working on isotone metrics into my certain isolated body, and then I have 3 days a week, which is climbing, elevation training, which is 40 pounds in my pack, going from sea level to 1,000 feet, get to the top, meditate, and then I have deep water training, which is with deep fitness now, and then free diving in the pool, run rock training and breath holds, and then recovery. And so everything I do is basically always leading up into one of those mountains, which is again when we deep into it, every region that's the one of the seven summits or one of the seven volcanoes has five training mountains that I go through and train on. So it's basically a village. Like Melissa Reid is my mentor. She's the first woman to ever climb Everest without oxygen. She's mentoring me on mountaineering, and then I have like coaches for different aspects of what I'm doing. So yeah, always
We
thinking
should
that. So
talk
yeah,
we should talk about the plan. Like, so tell us the plan. So
yeah,
it's 14 summits, right? It's like seven
right.
volcanoes and the seven highest mountains on each continent. Is that what it is?
Yep, yep. Yeah. So it's seven of the highest, yeah, seven of the highest mountains. So that's Everest, Elbrus, the highest mountain in the world, which is Everest, Elbrus, the highest mountain in Russia, which is, Europe. And then you have Kilimanjaro, Denali, Aconcagua, Pujak, as well as Vinson, which is in Antarctica. And so on top of that, not just going for the highest seven, going for the highest seven volcanoes, which are training me up for those seven. And then when each region as well, out of those seven regions, there's five other training 5 other training mountains that lead up to that. And I picked it because based off what we saw, I've been climbing. I taught myself how to climb and surf and swim over a decade ago. And I started, just going around and helping people with the Between Worlds project that I developed years ago. And I was just climbing around the world. And then when I saw what happened this year, or last year with George Floyd and the civil unrest with social inequality and such, I honestly was like, I'm going to do more than just be a hashtag. I'm going to stand on the top of a mountain and talk about these issues as I break through a glass ceiling. So
That was one of the questions I had, actually, because obviously that's one of the things I find really fascinating about the whole project, actually, because obviously, like, mountaineering, the history of it, I've spoken about
mhm.
this before on here, actually. It's very colonial, isn't it? It's very
Yeah,
kind of the language of it is very, it's very like kind of white people go to different culture and like bag peaks, like tick
yeah,
off peaks, and and like
yeah.
the when you look, I mean, I've like quite sort of familiar with the history of mountaineering, and it's definitely very linked to like that kind of colonial expansion of like different countries, and even now, like it can be when something when a milestone is reached that has a different purpose, if you like. I'm thinking actually of K2, like the winter ascent. It's still really, really rare, that
Yeah,
there's like any kind of
it's
there's any kind of like purpose or foundation beyond that. Like, I'm going to go there and I'm going to climb that because it's like a ticking off exercise. And I know that's like a really, there's probably like climbers and mountaineers really cringing at that like really reductive kind of take on it. But you know what I'm getting at? Like, the question, I guess, is from what I've seen, like the meaning of what you're trying to accomplish, that you're imbuing this quest with, is as important as the actual
mhm.
feat, right? So I guess that'd be the question.
Right.
Could you explain like the roots of that?
Yeah, so for me, like I was born in Detroit. Again, I would say this, the Between Worlds project, the whole genesis of it is we're all born into this world as a lottery ticket, and our value is placed upon our social, economic, our race as we're pushed out into the world. But we're never asked those questions before we're born. We're never asked, like, where do you want to be born into, what color you want to be, what race, what gender you identify as. You're just really pushed out into the world with your lottery ticket as a life. Your values then placed upon you based upon the society you grow up in, the community, your laws you see it as. And for me, it was my lottery ticket was you're going to be an African American male born into a single parent household in Detroit, Michigan, in a society that doesn't really understand minority rights right now. And so for me, learning how to navigate that space between under the glass ceiling of the between, like, again, where you're born into, and then breaking through that glass ceiling to be in a place of where you're able to navigate freely. Um, I saw that with my relatives that helped me be the first person in my entire family to go to college, go work for corporations, from the Patriots, Lego to Live Nation, Ticketmaster. And for me, I was privileged to travel the world to see that at an early age. I got to live in Hawaii. I got to go to school in Europe. I got to learn multiple languages. And so as I started to climb and find peace within nature, I started to notice that every climb I did, I was like, I'm the only black guy here. I remember being on Mount Fuji, and I was like, I am the only, and I had to do a rescue on Mount Fuji, and I was like, you're the only black guy up here on Mount Fuji, and you're doing a rescue right now because people don't really have the right proper gear for this. And then when it goes to when I really hit me with the Between Worlds project is when I was doing the Trinity Summits, which is the highest mountains, or it's like a challenge, which is Mount Fuji, Kinabalu, and then Mount Jade in Taiwan. And I get to Taiwan in this little tiny mining town, and I'm drinking hot chocolate, and this woman's like saying, "Hey, where are you from?" And I say, "I'm from America." And then she's like, "Oh, I love America." And I'm like, "You should come to America." And like when I say that, and this story lives in my heart because as soon as I say that, I sound so ignorant because I look around and like her lottery ticket shows that she would have to sacrifice so much more just to get to America, and then more and more than that just to experience America like I do. And that's the point where I said, I'm not going to go to a country anymore, absorb the resources, take a selfie at the top of a mountain and be like, cool, I did something, and go back to my desk and be like, that was a great vacation. At that point, I said, no matter what, I'll always look to the community and the culture to see what they need and be more than just there. So immerse myself into it. And that was 6 years ago. And I was doing that on my own funding. I climbed Kilimanjaro on my own, Walmart boots, pants, a double hoodie. If you look at the photo on Instagram and such, like, again, I have like at the time like a North Face jacket and two hoodies on, and like I'm sitting at the top of Mount Kilimanjaro meditating. And the same with Aconcagua. And so, to your point about colonialism, all of these achievements I started to notice, and I was like, especially after the summer where we saw like so much civil unrest, I was like, the safest place for someone of color is in nature, if you think about it, because Mother Nature's not going to kill you because she doesn't like your skin color. She's going to do what she does, which is cycle. She's going to, like, this is the gift I'm giving you. Can you handle it? Yes or no? If you can't, you should leave. If you can, come through with it. And I learned that like growing up in different parts of the world and finding happiness in Hawaii. And I really, it clicked in my head after losing, my great grandmother and other people close to me in my family to COVID, that I was like, I'm done being a hashtag. I'm done looking at the statistics that says I have a 3-time chance more likely to die in a routine traffic stop for being black than climbing Everest multiple times without oxygen. That doesn't make any sense. I've been pulled over and put my hands on the car in handcuffs more than I've been promoted and having dual degrees and having certifications. And I was like, this doesn't make any sense to me. And I was like, if I'm going to die in some place, I'd rather be on a mountaintop looking at happiness and in freedom or in a wave that is pushing me forward than in a society that doesn't understand me. So that's where the Between Worlds project come in. And for me now, it's basically standing up for those, against sexism, racism, and socioeconomic barriers along the way.
So a big part of it then is breaking the kind of opportunity barriers that are
Yeah.
in place for everybody. Like, because you use the metaphor of a lottery ticket, and you're obviously talking
Hmm.
about um, people from, you mentioned Indonesia. Like, was that where you said you had that epiphany where you kind of realized like
Taiwan.
the
Yeah.
Taiwan? Sorry, my bad.
Yeah.
But like obviously that's as you rightly say, that being bound by the circumstances into which you're born is a universal human experience. And like
Hmm.
a key theme is to show like a way of breaking out of that, and to show that like you can change that with the right support and the right ambition.
Right. Right. And I think it comes down to what we see now where honestly, Matt, like, thanks to Phil. Phil, if you're hearing this, I love you. Thanks for getting us together and like connect us because like honestly, a lot of brands prior to this didn't even know who I was. And I was doing this for 6 years and like going around and like watching some of the best climbers climb some of these big mountains. And I remember just being in my expedition group and people are like, how have you climbed like over 50 mountains around the world with like not gear? And I was like, my mental stamina started back in Detroit. Like, I'm not being chased down by the cops. I'm not having to dodge bullets in a drive-by shooting. I'm not, I went to school in the projects. So all I have to do is keep walking. And that's all I have to do. Like, that's literally what I did every day. So now you're just telling me to walk up a mountain. So it's basically, so you're saying, like, taking that lack of awareness that a lot of brands people don't really see that it takes so much for a person of underprivileged to get to experience, and by the time they get there they've already gone through so much mentally to experience that those that are privileged don't even know how to relate to it. And for me, like when people are like, how are you climbing in those conditions and still going, it's like my mind's already learned how to handle this already. If you just give resources to those athletes that are willing to do this and invest in them, I guarantee you're going to see a bigger return on investment, not just on that, your company, but also within the community as a whole. So yeah.
You talk a lot about one of the things I've seen from doing some research into like previous conversations that you've had is you're really open about the fact that you've used like I was raised by a village, like the people
Yeah.
around you really gave you the help to broaden your horizons to the point where this would seem like something that you could do almost, because it is
Yeah.
culturally, we're talking about cultural expectations, we're talking about cultural circumstances, we're talking about who gets the right to almost do what really in our society.
Hmm.
And those kind of
Right.
those kind of barriers are so invisible yet entrenched, if you like, that we all take them
Hmm.
for granted. But
Yeah.
essentially it is very, very unusual for somebody of your background to kind of be on this path, isn't it? Which
Hmm.
is a shocking thing to say almost, but it is true. Like it's not common. And obviously that's something that you're trying to change. So what
Right.
do you put the upbringing that you had from your grandparents and your mum, and the fact that they helped to kind of show you these possibilities, was that one of the things that kind of set you on this path to almost like, because you mentioned earlier, like, I was, from my background, I should have gone one way, like, really, like,
Hmm.
my path was set, like the life that I should have led. And obviously you've done something completely different. So I guess my question is, like, where did you get the impetus and the desire to change that from? And I'm guessing, like, a large part of that was from the inspiration that you got from your family and your immediate people that helped to bring
Yeah.
you up, right?
Yeah, for sure. And that's a good question, Matt. Like, honestly, that's well phrased up for it because it came from my family, my great grandmother, my grandmother, my mom, my uncles, and my grandfather and my brother. Again, not growing up with a dad, I never really cared for it. I don't even know what he looks like. And everyone's like, does that bother you? And I'm like, no, I exist. I'm pretty happy I get to exist. This is pretty cool. And I'm like super excited about that. And people are like, that has to bother me. I'm like, no, like I think early on I learned that the people that love you are there for you. And like if you don't focus on those people, you're gonna miss out on some beautiful moments with them. And so for me, like my great grandmother taught me how to read when my mom was working and really busy, like supporting three kids and herself. And then my grandmother, gave me the opportunity to see the world, when she, took me out of Detroit and got to let me go see and live in different parts of the world. I got to experience that. And my uncles taught me what it meant to be, masculine, but also not to be compassionate at the same time, and getting that compassion from my mom as well. And she was being two roles, a working woman and a hard, disciplined dad at the same time. So for me, watching all those people in my family that never been to college be successful in their own right and happy, they just cracked open the door for me. And when that door was open, they gave me the opportunity to go and run. And that's the difference when people talk about a George Floyd or about Aubrey, or the difference between those gentlemen and myself is just opportunity. Statistically, I would just be the same as them. And people would really always like again, like me going to college on a D1 scholarship, getting into like Morehouse and, getting like deciding I was like, I'm not going to go to Morehouse, and like having the opportunity to choose comes down from that foundation, which was my family that gave me the discipline, the compassion, and the door and the opportunity to choose that path as I so wanted. And that's my village at the end of the day. And now when I go out and like you said earlier, like what's the plan? I sit back and I think intentionally about who is wants to be in this village on this long journey up these mountains till we get to Everest. And then looking about like people like, oh, that's cool, I want to be a part of that. I'm like, do you have the mental capacity to deal with what's about to come? Because there's going to be people that are going to say some pretty nasty things about the way I look, or I should be doing. And my family, let's go back to the beginning of this, they dealt with civil unrest coming from a mixed generation, mixed background, black, white, Hispanic. They already dealt with that. So they already knew what to prep me for and how to carry myself. I just had to keep doing it and find my own framework. And that's the same thing I think of now. Like, who wants to coach me? Who has the time? Who has the patience? Who understands what I'm trying to do? And without my grandparents and my great grandmother, my late great grandmother, I wouldn't be the man I am today that can sit down, meditate, and be intentional about not just the project, but what comes after it when I'm done with it as well. So,
Well, it's about giving people the opportunities to imagine a new way of life for themselves, though, isn't it? Like, and I think I often, because
yeah,
the question of privilege is obviously something that's been debated endlessly over the last year, um, and to the point that there are people on the other side of the argument who sort of claim privilege doesn't exist, and all this stuff that we kind of know about. But
yeah,
privilege for me is like, what I've come to understand is it's the right to imagine a different life for yourself on a lot of different
right,
levels. Like, if you're
right,
white and you come from the background that I come from, for example, which is very privileged, the idea that I could live a different life than the one I was born into is pretty normal. Like, I can
right,
go and do what I want. I can go and do what I want, really. Like, and from when I was a kid, I was kind of told that I could do what I want
yeah,
if I wanted to go and do a season as a snowboarder, I could do that. If I want to go and live in a different part of the world, I could do that. For whatever job I wanted, I could do. That
Okay.
to me is what privilege is. And that isn't that that freedom to imagine these new ways of life for yourself isn't open to everybody, because as you say,
No.
when you come from a particular, as you put it, the accident of birth means that you're born into a particular situation with a particular
Mm-hmm.
historical legacy and particular cultural legacy that can define the future that you imagine for yourself very, very narrowly. I think that is just
Mm-hmm.
very true. And
Sure.
the conversation that's going on at the minute for me is about, well, everybody should have the freedom to imagine a new life for themselves, and everybody should have the
Exactly.
freedom to to
Mm-hmm.
to to choose. And for a lot of historical and cultural reasons, that isn't the case for everybody. And that to
Mm-hmm.
me is why the work that Phil's doing, the work that you're doing, is really important. And that's why when people say, oh, well, the outdoors is for everybody, like, what's the big deal? Like, if you want to go and like, if you want to go and like go and climb a mountain, or like, and it's usually white people that say that, and it's usually white people that are just so used to the idea that for them they can do what they want if they want to. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I think that is why this conversation is so important, and that's the power of the idea that you've got, because essentially
Yeah.
you're kind of saying, I've made my own future here. It wasn't the one that was given to me. It wasn't the one that people from my background even knew about, but I've kind of created it. And yeah, it took support. It took people
Yep.
that opened doors for me, as you say. But
Right.
that's the point of this conversation, isn't it? The point of this conversation is to say, and everybody should have that freedom to imagine the future in the way that they want. And
Yeah, exactly.
I think there's a lot of work to do, I think, but that's why I think that this yeah, I mean, obviously I'm joking, like, but like, that's why this is important, and that's why that's why the more that these conversations can be had in the open and addressed, then
Yeah.
the more it's going to change, right?
Exactly. I would be 100% with you. And I think anyone that I've listened to majority of all your podcasts leading up to this, Matt, which are amazing because you asked amazing questions. And the one you did with Sal was showed exactly what you just described about privilege versus non-privilege. When we had protesting, and by we I mean the people around the world of what happened with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, uh, there was, and I'm going to talk about my own privilege in a second, what that means to me. The media betrayed when we were peacefully protesting as individuals, multicultural in America, about what was human rights. There was gas, there was, police, armed police. You were beaten. What happened in Portland, which was never really talked about on huge media outlets. It was pretty much never even, like, you had to thank you, Sean King, for pushing that out there for people to see it on other platforms. But again, then let's fast forward to January 6th, right? You see people walk into the state capitol as if the doors were open, as if it's Mall of America and revolving doors, doing things
But it's like
when the
the queue for
concept.
a ride at Disneyland. It's like,
Exactly. You're just like,
it,
so, yeah, you're like, hey, oh, I want to go into the state capitol, put my feet up on, like, where the Constitution, like, and cry. I'm like, so basically you're telling me that if I'm a privileged individual with a certain complexion, that I can get away with going in to harm our voted in representatives of our country and scare them so much because I'm so angry of change that not one of any of you will be shot with any pellet, tear gas to cry. You will be carried out peacefully. But let's now fast forward to what happened before that. I'm going to say the 45th, Mr. 45th said, if the looting doesn't stop, the shooting stops. It was in his Twitter. I'm just going to paraphrase that exactly what I saw. No one was shot that day, really, on the 6th and of January, but everyone else had to deal with gas, federal employees taking people into unmarked vehicles, zip tying them into certain cities of color. And this is just us saying we want just not the basic essentials, the same rights that our constitutional says we have. It shouldn't be a question of when I drive my car down the street, when a cop pulls me over and says, "How can you afford this car?" I have to explain that I have 2 degrees and I work for mostly the corporations that you send your family to and enjoy. That shouldn't be the case. So when it comes to privilege for me, let's now get back to that definition you talk about. Privilege to me means this: you have the ability, to your point, to imagine in your mind a free space. Yes, the mind is the biggest space in the universe if you want it to be, and also the smallest. And not to contradict myself, where I'm going with this is when you have to think about, can you walk home safely without being stopped by the cops or being harmed by an individual? You have to fill that space in your mind with so many ways to stay safe. Where's my food going to come from? Will I get this job? Will I be said racial remarks? Well, now let's take that same idea and put it in the outdoors. I live in Southern California. Hunter Jones, myself, Sal, and a few others, we are probably the only African Americans you see in the lineup outside. I will go out to Malibu and I look around, and yes, everyone looks black because they're wearing black wetsuits, but on the surface of their head, they're all white, and I can see that. So it's not really hard to find me or a Hunter. We can just see each other down the lineup. And I can tell you the time I saw Sal, I was like, that's Sal at Venice, because I was like, that's the only other black person I've ever seen out here in like my 3 years living here. And so, again, people that live in Compton or Inglewood are not that far from the beach. You're pretty close to it, to be honest with you, like if you look at it on a map. What
Yeah.
those people are doing are trying to survive, because economically they're not given the same institutional opportunity to explore and fill that mind with what you're describing of the ability to be outdoors. Let's now take it to the mountains. It costs money to be in those mountains. And I'm going to say, let's break it down from a very micro level. You need a car to get to the mountains, right? You can't just ride your bike to Mount Whitney here or to Mount Baldy. You could if you want to. If you want to ride your bike to Mount Baldy, please do that and then run up the mountain. I will high five you and give you some Venmo for that for sure. But again, those people in communities are not given the same opportunity to actually, and what I mean by opportunity, I mean investing in education, so they are able to go to certain schools and then have the ability to get certain jobs that are not screening based off. I'm like, okay, why can't we find, again, before I go on a little tangent, let's back up. Why can't we find individuals of color that are attending MIT from America at a high rate? And I always say this: if you want those individuals to be there, and if I were to take a portfolio of everyone that's graduated from, let's say, MIT to some degree, what you will find is, why is it so hard to find an African American that is highly trained in mathematics and engineering and in aerospace? I can tell you, probably because you're not investing into mathematics early on within those inner city communities or those urban communities. So therefore, you're not really giving them the opportunity to springboard into that kind of thinking style. That's the same as you think of outdoor community. If you don't give someone the opportunity to really do that and invest in those communities, they're never going to get to the ocean because they're trying to just survive with food. And I can speak truth to that because in Detroit, the last thing I was thinking about, and I always say this, the first mountain I ever climbed is every day from 770 Asbury Park to the projects of my school and back. And I wasn't thinking like, can I go climb Kilimanjaro? I was like, I'm just trying to survive. I'm just trying to have food on the table. That is more than likely why representation matters, because if someone of color sees themselves outdoors, now they can imagine it and they can be like, I can exist there. I just need to find the framework to get there. And that's your point why Phil and I really are passionate about this, because I tell everyone the Between Worlds project was never about Andrew Alexander King. And it was mostly, I was very hesitant to make it about me for a very, very long time because I didn't want to take away from other nonprofit stories. I really didn't want to do that. And people were like, well, you got to tell your story where you came from. And I was like, all right, I'll do it. At the end of these 14 climbs, I'm going to go back to being the guy that's just, behind the scenes. It's someone else's turn. That's it. Like, if I'm still, the face of this in 10 years, I've done it wrong. It should be a individual from India or a woman that's fighting for her rights in the Middle East, or some individual that's in Africa fighting from xenophobia or like colonialism. That's what this is about. they should be have the brand set up, be like, this is how you do it. This is the framework. This is the road. Here's the map. Let them go. Um, and to talk to you about privilege, just to make sure I can end it on this note, I wrote this on my Instagram about an experience I had here when we did have looting. And it's a true story to the point. When we had rioting and looting in Santa Monica, it was pretty hard because I was with, downtown in the peaceful protest, and it flipped from peaceful protest to looting in an instant. It went really scary. Like, again, promenade. If anyone's ever been in Santa Monica, you know what I'm talking about, where the promenade is. It went from people protesting and being peaceful to cars pulling up, blocking, certain exits, and people breaking into like Patagonia and REI. I'm sitting there with my camera, and I've seen riots before from like being in Egypt and like other places around the world and seeing what riots are like. I'm like, okay, I know what a riot's going to look like when it's coming. And I'm fine. I'm like, okay. During this moment, I see two white guys standing in front of REI protecting it. It's REI. They got millions of dollars. They're not going to really give you a badge or a cookie for that. Straight up REI, love you guys. But I'm just be very honest. You weren't going to hand out cookies or badges to them or free gear. That was the truth. And so I'm sitting there and I'm looking at the wave come down. I'm like, okay, they're trying to protect the front door. These wave of looters are coming down and they're busting the side windows. I see these two white guys run into a crowd of like 30 to 60 people. It's a pretty massive crowd. And I already know how this is going to end. That's like running into a gazelle running into the mouth of a lion. I'm like, this is not going to end well. And I'm looking at it. I run. I take one guy. I intersect him. I'm like, don't go do it. Stay here. Hold my camera. I'm going to get your friend. By the time I get to his friend, who's standing in front of that window, he's beaten, bloody, and the mob is of like looters are just beating the crap out of him. Right? And so I come in and I put my body between him. And this is where I want to just draw this conclusion. This is where privilege happens. I now have the privilege with my skin color to stop this intersection of violence because I am black from killing this man. I could have used my privilege to say like, well, that guy's getting what he deserves. I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Let me just go home and, and eat my cereal and see it on the news. That space in my mind of growing up in a turbulent environment and seeing violence and choosing to use my privilege to help someone else is what privilege means to me. So stepping in and just saying, hey, just let me get him out of here. Everyone just stops kicking him. He's already bloody from the face and it's just bleeding. And I'm like, dude, you got to just run. Like, they don't care about you. They're getting in that store no matter what. So I get this guy up. I get him to his feet. And when I get him to his feet, someone starts punching me in the back of my head and taking my like phone out of my pocket, my card, my ID. And it's a black kid. I turn around and it's just this black young kid punching the crap out of me. And I look at him. I'm like, hey, first off, this kid is punching horribly. His head is down. His arms are locked. And he's just swinging. I'm like, you're not going to kill me because if you want to kill me, like you're basically not going to do it. And I'm like, I could probably just take this kid and just break his arm easily. And I just let him keep punching because at that point, I see that kid is me from back in the day where you had to fight your way out and prove yourself to your community. And privilege again is like, what do you do in that moment? And I just let him keep punching me. As the white guy gets away, the two white guys get away, my camera's stolen, my phone is stolen, and everyone disperses when the cops get there. And I just walk home bloody and treat my wound and go surfing with my friends. I'd say I tell this story because that's the difference between using privilege, knowing privilege, and handling it in a certain way. So that's my tangent
Which
on
is
that.
but it's important because it is always a choice and it is a power.
Yeah.
And it brings me to the incident at Manhattan Beach. I mean, that was like I just listened
Yeah.
to Ryan, is it, on
Yeah.
So
Right.
Splendor,
Right. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Salema was talking about it as well, and that was almost one of the most shocking parts about that whole incident: the fact that there were so many people there who had the
Mm-hmm.
power and
Mm-hmm.
the agency to stop it, and nobody did. And again, that
Mm-hmm.
and obviously that incident was horrible, but what that incident was really about was again control, access, who had the right to be in that space, like
Mm-hmm.
the and the historical entrenchments that exist because of the cultural history that's led us to that point. Like, and
Yeah.
it and that was an example of privilege not being used and that power being ignored, which was what almost made it so
Hmm.
shocking, really. I think, particularly what's been going on in the last year with the wider conversation in, for
Hmm.
example, the surf community.
Yeah, and I think that for me, like I went to that paddle out, and for me, I've been. This is where everyone talks about that photo on Instagram where everyone sees me jumping into the barrel at Zigatella in Port Escudino. That photo is fueled by
It's a good
people.
photo.
I remember. Thanks, my friend. Thanks. I'll be back down there in like a week or 2 weeks. But people didn't know, like, being someone of color. The only place I didn't experience racism was Hawaii to me, because I was like, oh, these are brown, like these people of color, and you know, they're basically fending off white people, and I was like, oh, this is cool. I was like, oh my god, they're like really like taking in the Hawaii, and I was like when I was a kid, I was like, oh my god, this is so amazing. This is like, I was like, this is the opposite. I was like, this is real, and what it told me in my mind was, it was like they weren't just fighting to protect the lineup, they were protecting their culture. And they did it in such a humane, loving way that you had no choice but to respect that culture, no matter what race or color you were. And when you look at surfing, for me as a African American male, what I look at is as that photo down in Mexico, it was fueled by people saying, like, earlier in the day, La Punta, where people were like, oh, you're not, like, black guys can't surf, I mean, swim, so how can you surf and such? And I was just like, oh, okay, cool. And what I did is I took it down to Zigatella, and I just saw the same person. I just went for it, and I pulled right into that barrel, and I just shot through it. And I was like, I learned from my grandparents, and to your point, for me at least, everything you send to me is rocket fuel, negative or positive. I just take the same log and I put it into the rocket fuel, and it blasts me forward, because I've learned how to use that mentally in my space, in my head. Manhattan Beach now showed me a very, 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 very sad truth of, when we had Black Lives Matter, we still do, when we had what happened this summer, everyone put up a black card, like 200, oh, sorry, 2.7 million people or something like that. I may could get, like, I could get those numbers wrong. Sorry if I'm not a mathematician. But out of all those people that did it, you are putting up just a hashtag and being like, I'm done. Cool. I did my work. You're now sitting and seeing a real life situation that's asking you to be more than a hashtag, be beyond social media, be beyond what you're doing. And that did not translate to that moment. And that was the truth, because people move so fast on hashtags and be like, I did something. Like, if we were to be a little bit more intentional, have that opportunity to think of that privilege what we have, that incident would have been over in an instant. It would have been diffused right then and there. I look at that photo, I'm like, you have what, 20 people in that water watching it go down? Two, three people could have just went over and be like, enough is enough. We're good here. And none of it happened. It took a protest of everyone coming together, be like, oh, you know what? We could have done something better. And I want to say this right now. If we would have done those things sooner, Ahmaud Arbery would have probably got home. And that's what I think about. I think about George Floyd would have got, you know, 7 seconds, 9 seconds of his life back, if we would have thought about that, been more intentional. But it's after the fact we do something. And I just keep seeing it over and over. I'm like, at some point, you got to be more than just what you put on paper and stand for those core values. And it's really scary because, like I told people, for me, when I resigned from my position at Live Nation, everyone was like, why are you walking away? Like, you're on the track to go from director one day to maybe like VP of what you've done. Like, you've been 10 years of your job, project and product management. And I wrote to the CEO and the team and I said, I'm not walking away because I don't love it. I made a promise to my community, my great grandmother, my friends and family, to see this change through. It may cost me everything, but it will not cost our future generation the pain and struggle that I had to see. And like I said at the end, I was like, the party that you go to isn't fun if you're the only person there that gets the music And every time you try to invite your friends to it, they're denied. And so I was like, I'd rather go back, get some of my friends, show them what the party's like, and then we're all in together. And that's the point of it for me. So seeing what happened at Manhattan Beach, it was sad. And people are like, well, what should I do? I'm like, be more than just there. Stand up, you know? So that's my 2 cents on that.
Do you think this instance like that though, and the kind of conversation that we're having about that, does it make you feel like change can happen? I mean, that's a big question, obviously, and I think I asked Lama a similar question at the end of that conversation. But
Yeah.
it is like it is an obvious one, and but because it is depressing. I mean, not to sort of digress about hey,
Mm,
let's talk about me, but like I've actually found this year I realized recently like quite depressing because I think it's like
mm,
I think it's kind of fundamentally affected my view of human nature. I think
mm.
which again is probably like a very privileged statement, but like I think previously I was a bit like, yeah, people are inherently decent, you know, like, but there's nothing like a pandemic and the harsh glare
Yeah.
of a conversation that we've had around race as we've had for the last year to kind of really show the naivety perhaps of that belief. And at the
Mm.
minute, like we've got a huge thing going on at the minute in the UK, like around women's
I
safety as
saw.
well.
Yeah, I saw
And
that.
it's
It's bad.
that debate is unfolding, to be honest, along similar lines. Really, you know,
Mm-hmm.
there's even a not all men hashtag to go along with the all lives matter hashtag that's doing the rounds,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just depressed me really. I think I've kind of it's almost made me think like actually maybe people are just selfish twats who don't want to change and learn.
No,
I
man.
sound like such a
No.
such a kook here saying this, but like it, you know, and it's been one of those
No.
years where you kind of have a lot of time to think about this stuff. But you know what I'm saying. Like, so I guess because it is what we've talked about is can be quite depressing. You know, like when you get into it.
Yeah.
Do you feel like though
Yeah.
that there can be? I mean, I guess the answer is in the deeds that you're undertaking, but do you feel there can be a positive outcome from all this? Do you feel like do you see
Mm-hmm.
a positive change happening?
Yes, I do. And the reason I'm not, I mean, the cool thing about my upbringing is being a realist and optimist. And though I do study Buddhism and Taoism, and that's my way of studying getting through life and how I navigate that space of the time I have here, I do see there is change happening. Change is incremental, it's not accelerated. You know, and I think everyone's like, it's going to be like that. We're literally changing the way that we have been for years. And I'm going to be the blessing and the curse of the pandemic is it made us slow down to really look at ourselves. When you're moving at such a high velocity, you're not really taking the time to be intentional about where you're going. You can be like, oh, I'm trying to go to the grocery store, but like, are you really looking? Like, that's an example. I leave my house, I'm driving to the grocery store. Am I speeding at the speed? I'm speeding so fast that I'm not noticing the homeless person on the street or someone getting mugged. I'm just going to the grocery store, got my groceries. Same person still getting mugged on the way back. Homeless guy is still
Yeah,
homeless on the way. All right, tomorrow I do the same thing. I notice when I slow down a little bit, I'm like, wow, that person's getting mugged again. That homeless guy's still homeless. The pandemic made a roadblock that you had to slow down and see yourself for what it actually evolved into, where humanity is going. Um, an existential point to your question: if we can't get things we as a human species right, how are we going to get it right when we move to different parts of the universe at some point? Like if we can't get it right here, right now, it doesn't really give us a sense to really come together and take on what else is out there beyond what we have here on this planet. And so I think we're heading in a direction that's going to take time, like anything else. And you get back to what you said, Phil and I doing the work on this is, and Sal as well, and Ryan, is I know that I'm not going to probably be around to see this tree grow of change, that shade. And my good mentors, Stan Evans, sent this to me. The change that we're doing, which a lot of people don't see, it starts as a seed, it grows into a small tree, and then grows into a big tree, and that tree has shade for people to sit under and not be burned by the sun. And it's going to take time, and I know that I'm probably not going to be able to sit under that tree with my niece and nephews, or if I have children and so forth and so on, or any other persons I meet that has kids. But I do think it's happening. It may not be at such a accelerated rate, but I think over time, the next generation is going to be so self-aware, especially with technology, to be like, that's not right. I'm going to take a photo of this and blast it on a media syndicate, and like really push that out there. And so it forces brands and countries to change. And to your point, I would just say, as I was traveling, what, 2 years ago now? Holy crap, 2 years ago now? I was in Santiago for their protesting on human rights, like down there in their capital. I remember seeing that go down when I was on my way to Aconcagua. They were doing it in Bolivia when I was there, and I kept flying into these places, and I was like, why does everyone keep protesting? And I just like kept sitting there, being like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And then as it slowly made its way up into America, then George Floyd happened. I was like, whoa! Like I just literally just saw so many protesting just happening. So I think, and just what happened just now in Mexico City, which I'm heading down to this Friday, I now see that people are tired of being just the status quo. They now get that, like, this is only this way is because we did not push through beyond what we said we were going to do. And so we only can hold ourselves accountable. Is it depressing to see? Yes. And I think change is really hard. It's gritty. It's sweat. It's blood. It's tears. It's sacrifice. But when you break through that glass ceiling and you get through it, you can breathe. And I think everyone is tired of being suffocated by their countries, by their laws that are outdated, and by the social, racial, and sexist stereotypes that really don't give people safety that data deserves in their once in a lifetime they have. So yeah.
The one thing that strikes me about the project is again quite an obvious observation, but the scale of it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a life's work, isn't it? Like where are you at with it? Like how far in?
So honestly, I've already done three, but I'm redoing all the mountains again. I've already done 3 out of the 14, so I'm redoing them all again. So starting Friday, head down to I head down to Mexico to climb the highest volcano in North America and three other volcanoes, and go from there again and start, and then lead up to Denali and then start again. But yeah, the Between Worlds project is a big project, and I would say I always told brands this before I had any sponsorships until this year. I was going to do it if it took me 50 years. I was going to do it, it took me 5 years. I was going to do it, it took me 10 years. The point of it isn't, like, I'm grateful to know you and get that out there, but the point of it is when this is done for me, of my story of this at the top of Everest, I can be like, you can go talk to Matt. Matt will tell you you're part of the Between Worlds project. I want to be an old tattoo guy on the beach, and I say this to everyone, and like, this is what I write every time down. I go, I'm gonna be an old tattoo guy back in the beach in Hawaii, walking down, and someone's gonna be like, "Hey, I got a scholarship from the Between Worlds project to go be a mountaineer guide in Europe," and we're gonna smile at each other. And they're like, "What are you smiling about?" And I'm gonna say nothing, and I'm gonna keep on walking. And I'm gonna go watch people surf at Pipeline, and it's gonna be the most diverse lineup. It's gonna be Black, Asian, White, Hispanic, going for the Pipeline Masters, men and women, and I'm just gonna be like, all right, that's all it was for. That's it. So it is a life's work. It is a lot of work. It's a lot of patience. But like I told everyone, it's like I don't fall in love with the goal per se. I know what I want it to look like, but I'm falling in love with the journey each day. Like the grind of waking up, training, going through it, sitting down, working with people and brands, because that's all it's about. So
Which came first, the project, like the physical feat, or the message that you're trying to convey?
the message, for sure, 100% came way first. Because honestly, man, I'll just say this on here. I didn't have a desire to be like, I want to be the first African American to climb, you know, Everest and such at this scale, or like all seven. It was more about just being a better human being. And when I went to these countries to give back, like I was already climbing. Just to go back to the beginning of this, like I climbed islands first around the world, like the highest mountain in each island besides Antarctica. So when I do Vincent, I'll be the first African American to do the highest island on each ocean. But like I was doing islands first because like I'll get to the top of the mountain, meditate, and then I'll come down and surf. That was my thought. I was like, I just want to get to the top, meditate, come down and surf some waves, and
Good plan.
and then that was a plan. So And then over time, I was just like, I don't want to be someone that just absorbs resources, to your point, where it's kind of colonialism, where you go, you absorb a brain, like you absorb a culture, you don't really sit down and listen to what they need. Like, and this is a difference for the Between Worlds project. It's not meant to go into a place, be like, we're here to captain save you. We're here to save you. Here you go. From developed
Yeah.
nation, just throw out $100 bills like T-Pain at an Atlanta strip club or something. I don't know. But like I don't really think of it like that. Like you it's about sitting down and being intentional. So any nonprofit I work with, I look into to see how funded they are, what message they're trying to push out. Does it align with my core values, which are the Between Worlds core values? And if it does, I say, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. I'm not here to disrupt your operations. This is truthfully who I am. And they usually are like, are you seriously just going to come in and give us $200 of whatever we want? I'm like, yep. You seem like you need that. And they're like, what do you want? I'm like, I just want to learn about your experience, what you need, write about it, help you push it out there into the world as I go and climb or surf within your community with your blessing. And that message has been for 6 years the cornerstone of the Between Worlds project. The climbing these 7 summits and the 7 volcanoes is the vehicle to show that humanity, to your point, can evolve and be more than just there. If it has the opportunity to see how to do it. And then it's not a question of can it, the question is now, are you willing to? Because you have that framework set up. And so that's the way I see it as. And hasn't changed for me since. I still have a good team I call Gravity that keeps me humble and keeps me grounded and makes sure that I stay on my toes and get enough sleep. So, yeah.
Why is it the right vehicle for this message?
I think it's the right vehicle because, to your point, you don't really see a lot of people of color outdoors climbing, volcanoes, mountains, or surfing big waves. You just don't. It's such a foreign thing. It's like people are like, I'm not used to seeing that guy up here. I'm not used to seeing that. But it's again, that vehicle is showing that change is possible. If a guy can come from one of the most dangerous cities in the world and have that love and compassion and understanding to push through, and you come from a place of privilege, you can do the same too, if you wanted to. Or if you're coming from the same, circumstances, if you wanted to, the opportunity is there. It's not easy by any means. And that's why I don't sugarcoat my training or anything. Like, it is not easy waking up every day and being like, I'm going to go grind it out, get my butt kicked, and be humbled every day. But it is worth it at the end if you do it. And so showing people that we're not just climbing physical mountains, we're climbing mental mountains, we're climbing mental emotions and getting through it. That's why I think it's the right vehicle. Because, and just to hit on the head, like back to what we said, standing on the top of the highest mountain in each continent and learning from the communities along the way, where I can speak to that and people can see that, shows that we're breaking through that glass ceiling, not just metaphorically, but physically as well as I go forward. It's not just about seeing me at the top, it's about seeing the women that are fearing for their lives, the men that are fearing for, getting shot by cops, the individuals that are feeling their social economical barriers. It's, to your point, it should not matter what color, race, or gender you identify as. You should have the freedom to pursue these pursuits if you so choose with the opportunity. And so that's why I think it's the best one for it. I mean, I could do F1, but
Yeah,
Lewis
I mean,
Hamilton already has that on lockdown.
well, but that's why it's the layers though. That's what I was getting at, because it's so
Yeah.
multi-layered. There's obviously the
Yeah.
physical side, the message, and then the visibility. I mean, that's just three off the top of my head, but like there's
Yeah.
it is fascinating, and like the. I thought I understood the kind of scope of the ambition of it, but I actually didn't until we spoke. Like, it is a life's work, isn't it? Essentially, that you're setting yourself up
Yeah.
for here.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the times when brands, so I got my first brands that sponsored me were Black Diamond and like Sea to Summit, Mammut, and then yeah, and like Hoka, they got into it and they're like they sat down, they're like, oh, this is just not like like a date, like a 1 year
Yeah,
thing. I'm like, no, this is, and then I sat down and I showed them all the mountains, like every mountain starting from Friday on, I've already listed out for them. Like, it shows every mountain. Like, there is no like, okay, we're gonna do something. Like, it's literally like This is it. And these are the backup mountains if we can't do one of those in those seasons for training. And when I sit down, they're like, this is a huge undertaking. And I would sit there and be like, for 6 years, I've been doing this with a GoPro, a drone, and an iPhone, and a Google Pixel now. I'm just doing it. And if I'm doing that with my savings and you're a multi-million dollar company, my question to you is, what's holding you back? And when they hear that, they're like, oh, like, yeah, it's not overwhelming. You just have to do it. You have to just take the step and then the next, and then get the framework. So for me, it's like I tell everyone, when we get to the top of Everest, it's someone else's turn. I hope to find that individual along the journey. And I hope to step away and make sure that they have a platform, or people such as yourself and Phil to come to and know that they can have a safe space. But there's so many different layers that we're cracking through. So yeah.
How you doing for time?
I'm great on time. I got nothing, man. How
Cool.
you doing for time?
I'm good. I'm gonna go another quick piss though, and then we'll carry on.
Yeah.
This is my middle-aged bladder. I'm gonna
Yeah.
leave. I'm gonna leave
Okay,
it
let's do
running
that. Let's
though
do that.
because I get a bit nervous about this like fucking up. So I'll leave it running, but I'll be back in like 2 minutes.
All right. All right, cool.
There we go.
Same. I was grateful for that.
Yeah,
No, this
I
is
did a
great.
few where
I think asking.
I did a few where I was like, oh, I'm just gonna pretend I don't need a piss. But it's actually quite stressful, isn't it?
Yeah, it is because you're like, yeah, I gotta go. I was like, I gotta go over here for a
Yeah,
second.
yeah. It's like when you're in a bar and somebody's talking and like had a few beers and like keep going. You're like, yeah, I got to go. Actually, I'm just gonna hold that thought. Um,
No,
I'm
it's
actually
great.
I'm actually hoping to get Stan on the show next month. Actually,
Oh, Stan Evans or
yeah,
who you said?
Stan Evans. Yeah, that's who you meant when you
Oh
said
yeah,
your
yes.
mentor, right?
Yeah, yeah, dude. Please get Stan. Stan is amazing. Like, so all the photo I posted yesterday of like the sunglasses, that's shot by Stan. Like
Yeah,
Stan and I do work together, and him and I, he's my mentor in photography because in like the understanding the media scope. So for me, I can say this, like my mentors now from a corporate space, have been people from the Pats, Lego, Live Nation. Like I've had some really amazing mentors, but when it came to the outdoor space, honestly, like Matt, like no one taught me how to be a mountaineer or surf big waves. Like I've all just been sitting here watching like Shane Dorian, watching like Laird Hamilton videos, or watching like mountaineer videos. Like I've just been doing that for years and being like, okay, cool, this is your dimension. So it's been a long, journey to like survive and do these things I love to do. But then when it came this recently, people were like, "Oh, this guy's not playing around," and I was like, "No, if I wanted to like train as a joke, I would have went to Disneyland down the street." And so Stan and I met, and he was just like, "You're serious?" I'm like, "Yeah, like I don't just come into this without like." Knowing business and how corporates work, like I'm looking to really push things. So Stan and I work together, and then Melissa Reid, who was again like the first woman to climb Everest without oxygen. It's done it numerous of times. Like she's my coach for that. We go back and forth, and then I have like JT, who's Soul Focus, who's my agent and stuff, and we work together. And yeah, I just have, and then a few other people I work out with, like the Deep Fitness crew and those teams. Now they just help me really navigate that space and humble me every day of my life. So yeah,
So, you
but
mentioned that
he's a
you've
good
got a
guy.
few
He's a cool
sponsors.
guy.
You mentioned that you've got a
Mm-hmm.
few sponsors on board now. So before that, it was all self-financed. It was all you kind
Mm-hmm.
of so
It was
to
all
go.
self finance, out of pocket. It still is. The Between Wheels project doesn't. So I don't take money. I gotta put this word. It's kind of interesting. The money for the climbs themselves are helped sponsored by some of these brands. Like Black Diamond does make gear. Sea Summit does make outdoor like bags and tents and stuff, and like accessories. And then there's Momu for my boots on the climbs as well. And then Von Zipper, that's Greg. I mean, sorry, GT. Thank you for that, man. You're amazing. For like goggles and such. They it's a village. It goes back to that village mentality. Like they truly sat down and they believed in what I was trying to do. And to your talking about this with brands, a lot of brands didn't. A lot of brands, to be very honest with you, were like, yo, we're like, we need people of color. We need people of color. And they're like, we can't find a new athlete of color. And I was just like, of course you can't, because you didn't invest into that. That's like you going to like your garden and be like, I need carrots, but I never like put down a seed for a carrot. And I'm like, you didn't like, so like you can't put that in your like your stew if you didn't never like plant the seed and like water that spot for it. So now you're just like, okay, I gotta go. I'm like, so when brands were going through the phase of it, like I was reaching out to people and vice versa, they were reaching out to me. A lot of brands didn't were kind of pulled back that I had core values, and I showed them my core values. I'd be like, these are my 4 core values. Do you align with that? Yes or no? And because if you don't, there's nothing really to discuss beyond that, because I'm not breaking these core values. They are literally my lighthouses to make sure I come home safely and make sure we see this through. And so Black Diamond was the first brand that really stuck to it. And Tyler Wilcock, former athletic manager there, got exactly what the Between Worlds project was. And then the rest of the team really was like, this is bigger than any mountain. I'm like, yeah, this is bigger than all of us. Like I'll use my story of my life and I'll be vulnerable for sure and do that. But just to let you know, like I'm one of millions out there that if they had the opportunity, they probably would have been on your roster already. So getting those sponsors to really think, not to see that not every athlete's going to be on a very elite level. It's back to your point. It's a very colonial fraternity kind of sport, both in surfing and as well in mountaineering. But the reason why you don't see athletes of color is because you didn't invest in them, which we talked back about MIT and that such an opportunity. And there were brands that when I sat back with like JT, even him and I within my agent, we were like, let's look at brands that are serious about this, because as soon as they take off with me, they're on this journey. Like there's going to be racial remarks we're going to get. There's going to be people coming at me from different angles. And I'm like, are you going to stand with me, not just on the top of the mountain when I have your gear on, but through this entire journey with me? And those were the brands that we went back on discussions, made me feel not just safe, but heard, and made me think of, again, if I were no longer doing this in 10 to 20 years, could I say to the next person coming up, you can go be at this brand and there's a place for you at the table and an agenda and pen and pad waiting. So
I think that's a really interesting point. A good friend of mine the other day made a similar point. We were talking about this whole conversation, and he was saying that he's been quite he's really noticed how, like, yes, in the last year some brands certainly have attempted to have a more diverse message, or like, for example, use people like Phil to tell their stories, but then when the
mm-hmm.
criticisms that follow haven't really supported, haven't have kind of left people
Mm-hmm.
quite isolated. It's a bit
100%.
like the Manhattan Beach scenario writ large across the
Yep.
industry. Like you can give people a platform and an opportunity, but unless you're then prepared to actually back them when it gets tough, it's kind of not really worth
Yeah.
anything, is it?
No, that's crazy, because I'll tell you a story. There's a really amazing athlete, and I promised her coming on your show I would talk about it. I asked her before I said this. I was like, can I talk about your experience? Because she was with a really big brand, outdoor brand. She was a really big brand. And she was the first person of color, I think, on their current roster. And she made it very clear that if the brand didn't back her up with the trolling of racial comments on their social sites, she would leave. And Lord behold, she stuck to her guns. And she was like, I want out. You didn't help me. You didn't back me up. You didn't take down the trolling comments. You didn't you didn't care about you prioritize your needs over my human, dignity. And when a brand does that, that's not a relationship anymore. And I get what brands are doing, because again, being in that corporate space, it's all, again, let me just break it down. When you sign with a brand, and I knew this going through, working in, NFL, like Lego and such, those are image rights. Image rights are basically saying, I can put your face on something as an ad. That ad, you wearing that clothes, will give me a market sell value for that, like for that clothing. Someone's going to go buy that because they can see themselves wearing it, and you're going to get X amount of dollars based off of that. It's not going to be incremental revenue. It's going to be pretty much a static sum of that. So when you put a athlete of color in your ads and you don't pay them anything, you're basically saying, to your point, hey, guess what? We're woke. And I always argue this. I know people get upset about that term, but I say you're still sleeping. You're now slowly waking up to that. And when you put an athlete in your portfolio or on your site that is of color to basically say that you're with the current terms, you can't just pick and choose what that athlete is for you. You're taking in their struggle and their story as well. And that has to be defended until they actually feel they're at an equal playing field with your privileged athletes that have been experiencing this type of gear and security normally for a while. That you're not going to get that with a athlete of color because we've already been scrutinized to some degree that we shouldn't even be outdoors. And so us being here, we're already getting a backlash of very, very derogatory terms thrown at us. And all we want to do is just be able to express ourselves as any other athlete does without having to, hide our color, but on your page. So seeing brands do that, what you just described, where you isolate them, is basically making it go backwards and forwards. Doing the inner work, like I say, like talking to your team, be like, if you do sign someone to your team of color, please make sure that you have a D&I work with internally to understand what terms are appropriate to use, what are not appropriate to use, how to use their image appropriately, how to tell their stories articulately. That's from their term. Black Diamond didn't take a story and just make it up about me. We sat down and I said, this is my life story from start to finish. Let me see what you take from it. You write up and go back, and my family and I will agree on it. And if we give the green light, go for it. They did that. And that's why I was like, that's a different relationship. So when anything came out, I knew that CP, Leah, Jess, Oliver, that team, they had my back, not just on the mountain, but just like here, as I didn't have to hold space for that anymore. Brands need to do that. You can't just give gear and call it good. You can't just post something and call it good. Look out for that athlete as if they are your investment for what you truly do believe in. And if you don't believe in it, just don't go down that road. Just stay true and just keep on going.
Yeah, I mean, it is like the metaphor, the Manhattan Beach thing. Like, basically,
Yeah.
it's not enough just to kind of pay lip service to the idea with a black square and a hashtag,
Yeah.
as you said, is it?
You
There's
can't.
got to be some substance behind it, and when the opportunity arises to actually provide support and foundation, like you do have to step up really, or else it is worthless, isn't it? When it comes down
It
to it.
is, and I think that's where you lose some of the best, you lose some of the best athletes that way. And I think people look at, like, people said to me the other day, like, you're a beast, and I was like, again, it goes back to, I just grew up with a very disciplined family, being a D1 athlete, and being in the corporate space, which is even more a beastly thing than I've ever endured over my career. But this is just me loving what I do. Like, I love training every day. I love getting up and going to surf, climb. But when you come across an athlete, again, like, I had those opportunities to learn from my mentors how not to be exploited, how not to, sign something that doesn't fit my core values, how to define my core values and push back in an appropriate way. Says we need someone legal in this room to be a mediator for us to get through this. You don't have that with other athletes because they're used to just getting anything to breathe. Again, let's think of the glass ceiling term. If you're just now breaking through that glass ceiling, you're sucking for air on the other side, right? So you're taking any space of that air you can get. And that athlete is thinking like, well, okay, if I don't sign with this brand, then I'm not going to have that oxygen or support. And I got to give it up to, I'll leave her name out of it. I got to give it up to that she walked away from that brand that didn't support her on feeling that she could get that oxygen and feel safe about receiving it to keep doing what she's doing because that brand was not looking out for that racial trolls that she said she didn't want. If brands don't really say and live by that, then you're going to have a big issue because I'm going to be very candid and honest just with you, Matt, and anyone hearing this is as time goes forward, athletes can use other platforms to generate income for themselves and not have to sign with big brands. You're now looking at a series like you have TikTok, you have YouTube, you have Clubhouse. They can grow their brand. And then when a brand comes to them and say, hey, we want to sign, they'd be like, why would I want to sign with you when I make 3 times as much and I have security on my side? Because you're not going to give me that security. You're not going to moderate that. So if you're not showing that to me, then I don't really need to go with you. I can just go build it myself over here. And if someone says, oh, that's not going to happen, like, I guarantee you're probably going to find someone that's going to think pretty much out of the box of that and do that at some point and be like, I create my own space. But that will always be the case if you don't stand up for your athletes on the same way you do for privileged athletes. You're going to find it very hard to find that nurturing for the carrot. You're always gonna be like, I don't have any carrots. So I agree.
I like the carrot metaphor. It's good. It's as simple. It's as simple as I've ever heard anybody put it. You know,
Yeah,
it is the case basically, isn't it?
I say it is, and I think where I was talking, like, who was I talking to? Like, someone goes like, "Are you?" Someone comes up to me and go, "Are you doing this just for like the notoriety or the clout?" And I said this to him. I was like, I was already more established in my 10 years of doing project and product management. Like I was already dealing in that space and fine there and well known doing that. I was like, I didn't really have to. I could have just been being like, all right, I'm just gonna keep going on vacation to the Maldives or something and keep surfing and be like, cool, it is what it is. It's your problem. Again, you know, but like that's pretty selfish. Like, and if I think about it in like retrospect, the way that I was doing the Between Worlds project was pretty selfish because I was hiding. And if you look up any Greek philosopher, and I think of philosophy in this point, like the only way you really move forward in life if you don't hide. And I was hiding behind being up on the other side, and I made it from Detroit, and I was just like, this is not helping anyone. This isn't nurturing anyone. Like, it's just I'm the only person of color in this room 90% of the time, outdoors. I was like, Andrew, you should do something more about it. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm doing the Between Worlds project. I'm like, you should show people beyond that it's possible with you. And I never sat down and meditated on that. And now sitting back with brands and being like, yeah, I'm an athlete, but I understand business very well. They're like, oh shit, this is definitely not a guy that you just should just take as a one-dimensional athlete. I'm like, no. And there's other athletes like that too. So I think nurturing people to feel that and get to that point really does help those brands navigate this new space of how to help athletes of less privilege and of color be nurtured and sustain the culture that they want. Because if you still have a all Caucasian roster in 3 to 5 years, it will be very tough for you probably to sell what you're trying to do, because you got to think of it. You're actually not even helping the rest of your demographic or branding portfolio, which I don't understand. But I think it's going to be very interesting in the next 3 to 5 years for sure.
Yeah, I think you're right. I had a question related to something that you mentioned earlier, because when you were describing the experience that you had with the riot, and you said you saw the
Yeah,
kid who was punching you, and
yeah,
essentially saw yourself, like,
yeah.
and the path that it's the theme of the conversation we're having, like the ordained paths that we're all given.
Hmm.
My question is, was there a moment that you realized that you could choose your own path?
Yep. So that's a good question. I think so. To be very open, I'm very open about this, and Matt and you and I have talked, and I definitely have her sticker on one of my boards, so it's really great to talk about this. But for me, the moment that I know I could choose my own path was the moment I got sober in life, and I stopped drinking completely, partying and such. And the reason why I say that at that moment was because it was very tough as an individual to leave my family, go be very disciplined, see the world, leave my brothers and sisters, my mom, Detroit, my great grandmother, which I wouldn't see as often and frequent as I used to, and go be the first to be in my entire family tree to go to college. They already were like, here's a path, go for it, go for it. I didn't get to choose that path of this where I am now until I really sat down and did some reflecting on myself. I've always played it to hey, this is what my family really needs. This is how I can support them when they're older, which I do now. But when I really took a step back and I looked at the trauma that I was running from, of being an African American, not feeling accepted by the privileged community and being accepted by my community for listening to jazz music or talking to white people would say or doing white things. And I just said, this is my life. I have to live it on my terms with the amount of time I have with it, looking for beautiful moments and being happy. That's when it clicked for me. That's when I said, like, I'm going to take that rocket fuel and go forward. But it didn't happen until, about my 20s when I really got into climbing and surfing, which a lot of people are like, oh, you just traded off like drinking for climbing. I'm like, no, that's not the same thing. Um, at that point, it really did push me to be the Andrew Alexander King you see now and accept my full name. Because to your point, at that point, I was like, if I never thought of this until that day, really. And my grandmother said this all the time. She's like, be proud of your name. And I never understood why she said that. And it clicked in my head was, as most this lottery ticket vessel that I have being African American, we never got the chance to choose our last name. It was given to us as coming over from slaves in slavery. And so I say my full name now because I told my grandparents and my great grandmother before she passes that I'm going to change how that name is used from now on. When it is seen, it's not going to be seen as you're a black guy, you don't know where your name came from. Like, I know my name. This is what it means. Mountaineer, explorer, climber, human rights, activist. It's called son, grandson, friend, mentor, mentee, lover of life. Boom. Anything else outside of that? Nope. That's it. But to your point, until I really I've been accountable, faced my fears, looked myself in the mirror and really said, this is your life, Andrew, what do you want to do with it? Then I got to change and choose my path. My grandparents got me there, but at that point they couldn't sit inside of my mind and my heart to really help me define that. I had to do that on my own. So
Man, thanks so much for doing it. That was really, really great. Really,
yeah.
really glad we did it. Took a while.
But that
We
that
had we had
oh,
we had a few false starts, didn't we? But yeah, thanks so much, man.
yeah. Yeah, man, I think it's been great. I loved it, and I know we had a false start, but I was like, we will do this. It will happen.
It's
I
my
know, man.
fault. It's my fault. I've been in head down in book world and yeah, try to get that shit done. But it's yeah. So how's the rest of your day looking? Have you got like 3 training sessions, a surf? Like, what's the plan?
two. Yeah, I have surfing in where's my phone? Well, I have surfing in 1 hour at HB in Huntington Beach, and then after that, deep deep diving. And then I gotta pack up everything and get everything ready to fly out to Mexico. And I was like, I hope I get to speak with you before I get to Mexico because the Wi-Fi's not great down there. so so
That
yeah,
was a
so
hard deadline,
I
wasn't it?
was it was a hard deadline. I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, I was like, oh man, if he's in England, it's like I'm not gonna be able to get any Wi-Fi to him over there. But no, that's the day. It's just packing up everything and then spending time with like my friends here, which are like I call it my gravity group. Part of that really just before I go on any expedition, just tell them I love them, give smiles with them, and just hug them because you never know what happens on those trips. So I just want to make sure I spend as much time with people that I care about and know they're loved, and I think about them. So that's my day.
So where can people that are listening find out more about you and the project?
You can find me at Instagram at Andrew Alexander King. You can find me on Clubhouse, which Matt, you should definitely do Clubhouse, by the way. If you're definitely do like that, that definitely will be your jam for sure.
Yeah, I've been
So
thinking about it. I had that like, oh my god, another social network to like. I was quite daunted, to be honest. You know what I mean? I was a bit like, oh fucking hell, that's another thing to add to the list. My to do list is already like way too long, and I was just a bit. But you are right. You're not the first person to have said that. Like, quite a few people have said, yeah, I think it's kind of made for the podcast, really. So
yeah, for you for sure. I think I know for me, I use it as like a lot of people see me writing on Instagram. They don't in like photos. They don't see me talk. The intellect, like articulate things. So I think, but for you, for sure, like hearing all your podcasts and the way you speak, like you definitely could hold a room and like blow that audience up, for sure. But yeah, there, Clubhouse, same, Andrew Alexander King, and then betweenworldsproject.com, and then the vlog should be coming out in a month or two. So yeah,
Ah, nice, sweet.
yeah.
Well, I look forward to meeting. What are your plans for Europe? Have you got like when's Elbrus?
Uh, That is next year, my friend. That's so
Is it?
next year is Elbrus. Yep. If COVID lets it calm down, we'll head over to Europe. I'll stay over there for some time, which will be Elbrus, Matterhorn. It's Elbrus, Matterhorn, Blanc, and then there's two other mountains as well. So I'll be there, climbing over there, and then surfing. You know me, I'll be surfing in France, and I'll be looking at Nazare for one day, maybe, on Super Tubes. So that'll be it.
Well, we've definitely got to catch up when you're over, and
Yeah, I
I
definitely.
might be in California. I mean, it's likely to be next year at this point, to be honest. But yeah,
Living here?
let's.
What?
No, just another trip. Gonna try and get over for round two of the. I did a trip 2 years ago where with my friend Owen, and we did. I think we were there for 3 weeks. We did 15 podcasts in 3 weeks. So we're gonna try and get back
What?
over, and yeah, it's pretty hectic. So we're gonna try and get back over next year to do that. That's what the book's about. The book's about that trip, basically. So
Wow. Yeah, dude.
yeah,
Come on over, Al. It's home. I'm not. After I moved out here again, like I moved out here to be close to my grandparents in their twilight years. Um, they lived in Washington, but yeah, dude, come on over. I'm here. Let's surf, climb, hike. I'll show you some stuff for sure. Meditate.
yeah,
I don't know if
man.
that's your jam, but I'm down for. But let me
That
know.
that's
But
that's next.
I
That's next to Clubhouse on the list. Meditation. Like,
I will work with. I like talk to Stan about it. Stan, I'm always like when I meet up with Stan, which I'm seeing him tomorrow. I'm like, yo, we're meditating. He's like, what is up with you being this hippity dippity person that loves everything? I'm like, hey man, you just gotta flow with the flow. So,
so many
but it's
people
all
that I
good.
really admire and that really have their shit together are you know big exponents of meditation. So it's definitely something that I think I need to need to dip into again at some point. So yeah, maybe I'll take you up on that for sure.
Anytime. All right, but yeah, brother, let me know and send me the book when you can.